time is the one thing you don't get more of.
Rethreaded consumed me. I mean, like, consumed my whole life.
Better to ask the right questions than to have the right answer.
Welcome to the Rethreading Lives Podcast, where we talk about how to take your threads of harm and through the rethreaded process, transform them into something that actually helps you reach your potential. We'll talk with different leaders in our city and our country and find out what they're doing. You'll walk away from listening to this podcast with useful insights and captivating stories on how you yourself can rethread your life and your business. I'm Kristin Keene, and this is the Rethreading Lives Podcast. Welcome to Rethreading Lives. I'm Kristin Keene.
And I'm Jason Jones.
And we're joined today by Stephen Freeman, founder and leader of Kairos Digital. So today we're going to talk about the Rethreaded process. Jason Jones, CEO of Rethreaded, Stephen Freeman, CEO of Kairos. Jason and Stephen might have man crushes on each other. So this is going to be a very fun episode.
We're brothers at the very least.
At least, yeah.
So we, at Rethreaded, we started talking about Rethreaded and what it meant. So we take our threads of hurt, disappointment, trauma, and we rethread them into something that actually gives us life and helps us reach our potential. And we had been talking about that at Rethreaded, and then Stephen proposed the question to us. So what is the process? What are the ingredients? And me and Jason were like, I don't know. And you're like, then you could have a 5-point thing, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, okay, skeptically went into the process. And then we went into the process and we interviewed, well, first of all, what made you, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's so, as we were talking, like, I felt like you had a really good view of the beginning and the end. You're like, here's where people are, and here's
like
where
a true
people end up.
visionary.
Yeah, a true visionary can see the exact moment, and they can see the finish line, and which I can sympathize with. Like, I'm like, absolutely, I can see this. I can see. The thing about visionaries is they can always see the future, but they don't know how far away it is, and so it's very clear to them, but the depth is very tricky. And so, in that process, I was like, the one thing that's missing is that messy middle. And I know you guys do the messy middle, but we can't really talk about the beginning and the end unless we are able to articulate an exact process of what it means to rethread your life. And as we were talking about, it's like, well, you're actually describing the problem of human suffering, like beyond just human trafficking, beyond just like the issues that survivors face. You're describing like the process of redeeming human suffering. And I'm a big believer that things are only useful if they're portable and memorable. And so having a framework or having some type of process, even if it's, large stepping stones through that process, is going to give clarity, and clarity rallies support, and clarity wins every time. And so I was like, I don't know what that process is going to be, but I feel like I have to send you on this quest to say, hey, talk to people, talk to survivors, talk to as many people around you, and see if you can identify some of these large movements in that process. And I love what's being developed out of that.
I obsessively love it too.
Yeah.
It's changed the game for me.
Yeah.
Because then it gave me words. So we then got together our survivors, a group of our survivors, and we sat down for 2 hours and said, what is your rethreaded process? We got together our counselors. What's the rethreaded process? What are the ingredients? And then we got together like our program team and walked them through for the 2 hours, and then put it all up on a whiteboard. Which I loved. Impossible. And then kind of could put everything in basically the same into 5 categories. I mean, everyone was saying the same thing in a different way.
Yeah.
So the rethreaded process, what I feel like is this universal process of healing. Yeah. Of reaching your potential. So I'll just go through real quick. Hopefully we can put something on the screen for the visual people that are watching, but with little summaries, and then we'll start the discussion. These are not in order because everything interrelates with everything else. I don't have my sphere with me. It's usually what I've been using. But openness, which is the willingness to see your thread, and that involves honesty and vulnerability. Honesty is to see. So that's like, what is your thread? And then to be seen is allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to be seen and how the thread makes you feel. Community, having a trusted group of people, or at least one person who you trust and walk with people. Purpose. What is your purpose in this world? What is your purpose in this moment? A vision, the belief that things can get better. And the one that is my thorn in my side is time. And that is the ability to sit with your thread and go through the process. So that's the ingredients that we came up with. And now I see it everywhere in so many conversations.
Yeah, we everything we do now around the building, it bubbles into this. So we have just general conversations, and we suddenly realize, and I think that was really powerful when we sat and we talked it through with you, and at one point it feels like you're creating something, or we've found something, and you use the words you've just uncovered.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've really come to realize, that this is kind of a law of creation, a law of humanity, not something that Rethreaded came up with. We've put words to it, and we realize that these are critical ingredients, but it's bigger. And what I think what we're learning is it's also bigger than just redeeming pain.
Yeah.
That it's also, when things are going well, you still need these ingredients to actually achieve potential. And so we use the word potential a lot because it works when you're trying to redeem suffering, but it also works when things are going well. These things keep that momentum going. It's a powerful tool, and we use the word ingredients. I think that's really good, because every time somebody sees the graphic, they think it's linear. They think this comes first and that comes second, and it just doesn't. There is no sequencing to it, because they're just ingredients that all have to be there.
Like, we like things to be linear because they make sense that way, but like nothing in our lives behaves in a linear fashion. We like to think as much as possible in like, well, it has to start here and then it moves to here, moves to here. The pain or the stuff that we have, it didn't generate linearly. It didn't begin at a certain point. It was messy. It had a bunch of small seeds, and they all kind of grew over time, and then they intermingled together. Then untangling them and like rethreading them into something else takes time. And it's like, you can't just start at one spot and then move around the circle. Like, nothing in life is that clean. Nothing in life is that pretty, right? It's all kind of messy, and that's kind of what makes it beautiful.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last podcast. We talked about, that systems take the humanity out of things. Yeah. And I think it's one of our catchphrases from, 4 or 5 years ago was, well, it's messy.
Yeah. What
Rethreaded does is messy.
Yeah.
And we actually embrace it, because it has to be messy if it's going to be personal.
Yeah.
Because it's people. This person's journey is not the same as that person's journey, and the process out of it isn't going to be the same. And I think that's really, really powerful, that it is individual, and therefore it's not just do this step first and then do this step. And I know everybody is going to want to hear, what are the 10 steps to turning my life around? And it's get these ingredients in there. The process will look different for you, but if you put the ingredients in, the product comes out in the
plus
end.
Time.
It's an absolute critical. Yeah. It's an absolutely critical ingredient.
Which is hard for a person who doesn't have a concept of time. For
2 reasons. One, we've seen that time could be, it's this dichotomy. It's time is fleeting, and there's not enough of it. So it's this precious resource.
Yeah.
And so I have to really use the time. I've got to invest in the time. But then also, it's this thing that I need to give myself enough of it to do the process. So there's this weird thing of get busy, get going, and don't rush the process. Live in it. Openness then comes right into it. You got to be willing to admit what is, and sit in it. And go through the process, because the process actually matters. It's not the end. Yes, the end, the potential or the healing matters, but you don't get to the end without the process. You have to have the process.
Yeah, the process is the entire thing. Like, our lives are not made up of these like finish lines. Like, every finish line is a start line, every start line is a finish line. Like, it's just this constant movement of us, like, and so it is the mechanisms through which we move through time that make us who we are. So
I know I had this moment, I don't know, was it 3.5 years ago, from God. Sometimes I feel like I hear a voice from God, and the word I got was, I'm going to pour new wine into new wineskin. Yeah. Which means, though, that I had to be made new so I can hold different things. And that's probably one why I think of as the Rethreaded process as a sphere. And I talk a lot about as you expand your sphere, you get to hold, you hold things differently. You get to hold joy and pain together, but your capacity increases because you've been through this process of redeeming it all. Yeah. And it's taken way longer than I wanted to take. But yeah, it's not, and it will never end. That's also the other thing that I've known that, but now after going through a lot of these things, I feel a different capacity inside me to hold things differently. And we watch it at Rethreaded all the time. We watch a woman's capacity to handle her life change. And it's awesome.
And it comes in waves.
So
it's not like they walk in, everything's all better and great, all and they go. They actually have to heal some to get to a place to be able to heal some. It's probably just a human survival technique. I can only handle so much.
Yeah.
I can only handle so much. But, we see these milestones of they've healed enough that then they can go deeper. And until they've done that first set of healing, time. They got to have the time. Because until they go through the first set of healing, they can never get to the second set because they can't look at it yet. They don't have the strength to deal with that piece yet, whatever.
I was thinking through about the wineskins, because like the whole metaphor of the wineskins is that like new wineskins are supple because when you pour the wine in, like it expands and it has to be able to have the expansion, right? And so like when you make wine now, they have these like pressure release valves that you make in the container, but they had to be able to expand. If they had already expanded, they can't expand more, right? And so like what you're talking about of like they have to heal some in order to heal some, like they have to be able to hold some amount of volume inside there in order to actually hold it, because there's just been a lot of like pain and leakage, right? And some of that healing process. But like if I were to rephrase the wineskin metaphor into current language, it's like, listen, we're going places, you have to be limbered up. Like there has to be this like, I'm ready to move and I'm like stretched out, ready to go. And I think God really likes people that are just ready to go, like just limbered up and ready to run wherever he wants to run.
I think you made a neat point too, and I think once people can see the visual of the sphere is I have this quantity of pain and my sphere is small and the quantity fills up the whole ball.
Yeah.
But as I heal, the pain doesn't go away. But the quantity that I can hold, now there's space for joy, and now there's space for relationship, and now there's space for trust, whereas before there was no space for it. The pain still exists. Our ladies are not going to just suddenly wake up one day and their past is no longer their past. So hopefully through healing, the pain goes down, but there's still a quantity that exists in their sphere. And for all of us, there's a quantity of that in our sphere. And the bigger we get our sphere, we still have the capacity to hold a lot of other things that brings the joy and the healing in there. I think that's powerful, what you were hitting at there.
I was sitting with very successful people, business people, very successful. One was an investment banker, one ran an airlines, the other one investment banker, and then started her own company. And I was explaining to them the Rethreaded process. Like, this is how it works. This is what we're doing. And like one of the women was like, that just sounds like a bunch of woo-woo. And I was like, well, what do you do in your life when you handle hard things? Like, what do you do? What's your process? And she thought for a minute and she's like, well, I guess I just don't deal with it. And she goes, I guess I started driving and was having panic attacks, and I just went to the doctor and I just got some medicine to stop my panic attacks. And I was like, oh, okay. It's the state of is that the state of the business world right now? I was like, that's so interesting. There was no openness.
Yeah.
And it was woo-woo. Didn't matter.
And numbing is preferred to openness and reality.
Yeah.
I'd much rather pretend that it doesn't exist, medicate myself out of it. And then we wonder why it reduces potential.
Because you're not actually feeling, you're not, it's like you're in a plane and the gauges are telling you something's wrong and you just put tape over the gauges.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's not great. Let's not do that.
And now I've taken something, whether it's pleasure or a pill or whatever, to mask the pain, but we don't seem to understand that it's masking a lot of good stuff in the process. Everything at that frequency is gone now.
Yeah.
So how am I the best at my job? How am I the best in my relationships? I'm not. I just took a big chunk of me out.
Yeah. And medication is like one like potential issue, but then like we self-medicate with all kinds of stuff. Like we self-medicate with like business success or like endeavors or like, you know, we can pour ourselves into anything. And if it's distracting from the discomfort of pain or the discomfort of being a human, then we're just saying like, because the fundamental belief there is I am not enough and I need something else to make me human. And it's like, okay, well, it could be alcohol, it could be tobacco, it could be sex, it could be, you know, business success, it could be anything. And we're just kind of propping up to say that, you know, that I would rather with these props get to this level than be human at this level and build from there.
Well, it can also be good things.
Yeah.
Because we even see it. It's a defense mechanism that we see it in the ladies coming out of trauma, that they invest all their time and energy into other ladies. That's a good thing. The problem is it's done for the wrong reason. They're doing it so they don't have to look at themselves.
Yeah.
So that healing never is accomplished, and they're not achieving their potential. They're doing a lot of good. And I mean, I think we see it in our churches too, that that people get really invested in their church when their life falls apart, and they pour themselves into a lot of good things, rather than being whole, rather than doing the hard things that it would take.
Because it takes time.
I mean, I feel like that was my story Rethreaded consumed me. I mean, like consumed my whole life since I started it. Wake up in anxiety attacks, like didn't sleep very good, handled my anxiety in totally different ways that were not healthy, worked all the time, thought about it all the time. And like people, I think sometimes our employees did pick up on this. Like their impression of me was like, you're so busy. You're so busy. I don't want to bother you. You're so busy. Or their feedback was, I don't want to bother you. You don't have time. You're so busy. And it was like a way to, how I handled my anxiety was just to work harder or whatever it is, my low self-esteem or whatever's driving me in that moment. And then I went on sabbatical, and everything that I built my identity around, it was gone. And so it was one of the most beautiful 3 months of my whole life. And then I came back into it all, and that was even harder than it was before. So like it's just been this whole rethreading process that takes time.
But
so
even in the beauty there was pain, because I think you were grieving through some of the process too, because you were having to release this identity. And then there's the openness of not nothingness, but the feeling of, okay, if that's not my identity,
what is it?
What is? Yeah, it's hard. That's hard stuff.
And then also to experience like what went on my sabbatical in nature or with someone I loved, like also to experience what it's like without that, and to like have true connection, like without all that pressure, without anxiety.
Well, I think the silence meant something to you. And so, I mean, think about how many times you go somewhere and you're meeting somebody that you know, and you connect once in a while. Well, how are you doing? Busy.
Everyone's busy.
Everyone's busy.
Busy.
Business is always good, and everyone's busy.
It's almost a badge of honor. You know, I'm busy.
It was.
And it's truly the modern form of self-medication.
Yeah.
Just be too busy. Well, what's that old adage? The devil doesn't have to make you do something bad. He just has to keep you busy.
Yeah.
So that you do no good.
Yeah.
And I think it's a space issue. Like when you were talking about, that's one thing that I reflect a lot on my capacity. I mean, in my sabbatical was like suddenly you're in the mountains and it's like this vast space. And like when you were talking about when your sphere's closed, there's only room for the pain, but as you expand, and it's a space issue.
It's a space issue.
And
My wife and I went to an art gallery this last weekend, and it's one of our favorite ones down in St. Augustine. And there's some sculptures that are just like gorgeous and like beautiful that we really love. But there's these paintings, and they were done with like the knife, like where they have like the little like putty knife thing, and they do the painting that way. And I was getting really close to it because it was fun to like stand back and then get really close to it. And there were some that just looked like photographs. And then you get really close and you're like, these are just smudges of paint. Like, these are just tiny little smears and smudges of paint. And like, I don't understand. And you get really close and you're like, this looks ugly. Like, this is just a tiny little mountain of paint sitting on here. And then you back up and you're like, without that tiny little dark splotch, it loses all of its texture and all of its contrast. And I was telling my wife, it's like, I feel like when we get really close to our problems, or we get really close in like the busyness, we're just focusing on this one small aspect of the huge picture. And like, if it's like a frustration or annoyance or anything like that, and then you get really close and you're like, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. And you just keep circling, you just keep focusing on that little thing. And then as soon as you give yourself the margin to be able to back up and put it in perspective, you get the entire picture and you realize like, oh my gosh, like that little thing, yeah, it's dark. It's not pretty. Like it's actually kind of ugly. But as soon as you put it into the texture of the entire picture, it's gorgeous. And it's like, it looks almost more lifelike than life in that, because there's just so much more texture in it. And like that image of like, you have to give yourself margin to be able to do the thing that you're meant to do. Like in the Old Testament, they would have the crops, and they would say, don't harvest to the edge of the fields. Well, why? Because that was you don't glean to the edge of the fields. You had to leave a certain margin. Most of it was so that the poor could come along and take some of it. But really it's like, it's another version of the tithe, where like, you don't stretch and pull and wring every bit of value out of the resource that you have. There is an abundance in what God has given you, enough to where you don't have to take every single piece of value and profit out of what you're talking about. You got to leave some left over, because without that, you don't have enough to be generous. You don't have enough to be kind. You don't have enough to become the kind of person that you're trying to become.
And you could put that into anything in your, I mean, that is the rethreaded process in business.
Yeah.
To your value, your assets are your people, and to not wring them out, to get everything out of them. And yeah, the return you get is so much bigger than if you do that. Glean to the edges.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
She originally asked, do you want to do all of these? And now I'm thinking yes.
So we can reschedule. Do you, which one of the 5 ingredients do you struggle with the most?
Time.
In what way?
There's this like urgency that I feel. I'm turning 33 this year.
Oh,
I know. But there's this urgency that I feel of like, there is only like, time is the one thing you don't get more of. And so you have to make the most of. And so there's this like machinery inside my brain that tries to wring out as much as of it that I can, because it's the one resource I don't get more of. You know, you can't buy more, you can't trade more, you can't do anything. And actually you don't know how much you have. And so it's a limited resource that you don't know how much you have of. And so usually time is the one where things that feel the most expensive are the things that take the most time. But things that are most expensive are also the most valuable, because they're expensive, because they're important, right? And so there's this like glitch in my brain that wants to do everything quickly and immediately, and does not give it the appropriate amount of time, because I don't want to. So yeah, it's time.
Like, does that look like like you rush at business, or you rush, like what does that look like?
What's funny is I never rush other people. So like, there's this, I think it's a very human glitch of like, you would never talk to your friend the way you talk to yourself in your own head. Sometimes like, if you said to someone else what you said to yourself, you would not be friends with them, because they wouldn't want to be near you. And so the same kind of thing, like to other people, I give a lot of grace and a lot of time and a lot of space, because I'm like, no, like the process of like growth, like it takes time, man. Like you have to be able to do it. But then if I'm like, ooh, I would love to change my behaviors I would like to exercise more, or hydrate more, or drink less, or like all these other things. And I'm like, cool, you made the decision today. You have to be perfect at it now. Like there's no room for like, the grace that happens over time. And it's been a learned thing, like something I talk about in therapy of like, no, it's okay to start small and just be consistent in that. Atomic Habits is an awesome book that's like, yeah, that spoke directly to me, because I tend to over rush the time because I don't give myself enough grace to be meh at something for a while I'm figuring it out. They're like, this is what the learning process looks like. I
mean, I still, we talked about this a few weeks back, and and I still think it's probably community. You know, you grow up in this, you know, pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of world. You do it on your own, and we kind of idolize those people. You know, I think maybe society is saying different things today. I don't know that we do different things so much, but you know, it was not. That comment today would be looked down on a little bit. I mean, socially, but yeah, I kind of lived my life in a world of, if it's got to be done, it's got to be me. Go get it done. And so, yeah, the ability to reach out and ask for help, the ability to, what would feel like admitting a weakness, that you need somebody else, you know, has just been a difficult thing. And I think part of it is you can do a lot by yourself. You can achieve some success by yourself. You can achieve your full potential. That's the difference. Is this isn't a statement about can you win a game or can you be successful. It's can you achieve your potential. What God put you on this earth to do is your potential, and can you do that? You can't do that without community. So, you know, we've had the discussion about, okay, and you said it before, it could just be just one. Community is not a group of people necessarily, but are you able to be open with another human being? Are you able to let people in? And so, I think even my wife would say that she doesn't think I'm as open as she would want me to be, that there's just things I'm just not really vocal. I'm not really out there because, and I think that's probably some of the language we use, the words, well, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. And it kind of confused our conversation around this thing. Well, it's not introverted or extroverted, but I think it's that kind of thing of introverts just generally don't share much about themselves. So that creates the difficulty of being open with another person. I think that's probably, it's not the quantity as much as just the privacy that I think a lot of introverts live in. So maybe that puts some more language around what we were struggling with on that introvert extrovert question. But
we were having this discussion. Like a couple people on our staff said they struggled the most with community because they're introverts. And I was like, and one of our staff members was like, yeah, I don't like to go out to like events. I don't like to go to the movies. And I was like, really, that has nothing to do with community or not community, because that's not what it is. It's building trust with another person and walking with them. And I was like, you do that really good.
And I would say that I'm very open and transparent with my wife, and that we're, you know, that we're really deeply engaged, but I just don't talk about some things. I just don't bring them up. I mean, the stuff that happened at work today, I just don't talk about it all. It's not that I'm.
It's because you've been talking.
I've been talking all day. I am out of words, but you know, that old thing. But it's not the unwillingness or the unsafeness. I don't feel safe to share or whatever. It's just I'm just done talking.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking about this weekend too. We had to get away before our third kid is born, and so we had a lot of margin and time to, you know, go to art galleries and talk. And one of the things that came up was like the openness, like was literally a topic where we were talking about. And I was like, honestly, like the stuff at work, like you've got enough on your brain. I'd like, part of me like is just making a logical assessment. Like you're tired, you can't solve what I'm talking about. And so I don't need to just dump it. I don't need to give you problems that you don't have the ability or desire to solve. Like it's not your job to solve these work problems. Like they'll solve themselves. But she came back to me. She's like, you know, it's not, she's like, we can have a conversation about whether or not, you know, I'm in a space where we can talk about it. But she's like, I love hearing about the things that are on your brain, because it's a question of openness. Like I want, you know, she really values, and I understand the desire to have the person that you share your life with be open about the stuff that matters to them. And so like that openness, like the word community, it's like calm and unity. So like that's, you know, many and one. And so it's, you know, like concert, symphony. So like all these like prefixes, it's all of the many things turned into one. It's like that could be 2 turned into 1. It could be 5 turned into 1. It could be 100 turned into 1. But it's any time where plurality is created into unity. And in a marriage, that's literally what's happening, right? Like you have 2 people who become one. And so the openness factor is a sign of that trust and vulnerability. And all that. I think guys just typically do like cost benefit analysis on the information you share, and we don't think of it as an expression of openness, but that's the fun part of being married.
Yeah, and you've been thinking about it all day, and you don't want to think about it anymore.
Yeah,
I'm done thinking about this now, because we can go to another section of our waffle to
waffle
spaghetti
brain.
And waffles.
Spaghettis and waffles.
We're like, spaghetti. Everything is connected.
But again, you're really nailing it down here. These ingredients are they interact, and the reason why I would say community and not openness is the problem is because I can get really real with myself about what is. I can be honest about it, and I can tolerate the pain of sharing that with people around me. Of we're having this. This is legitimately the problem we're having, whether it's in my marriage or it's at Rethreaded or wherever I'm at. That I can get really real about. The pain of the situation doesn't bother me. I have no trouble being seen in the pain or experiencing the pain. But that's why I think I agree with you that it's an act of openness. Yeah. But the difference is just the comfort level of bringing another person into the openness.
Yeah. And I wonder, I mean, how does this all translate then into the business world? Again, me and Jason had the conversation on our first episode.
Episode 1
on our differences as business leaders. Like, I have very little corporate experience, all entrepreneurial. Jason is mostly all corporate, and then we merged our strengths here. But like, how does it in the business world? How does openness and communication get applied?
As a leader, it gets applied where it's very easy for leaders to think that they need to be seen as the answer machines, as the problem solvers, as the fixers, and as the source of all knowledge and competency. Yes. And it's a huge trap because it undoes the thing you're trying to do. Because like a good leader, a good leader because they create good leaders. Yep. Not because they have people following them, but because they create good leaders. And so in that process, you cannot be a good leader if you're trying to be king. Like, kings are not good leaders, right? There's an adage, I think it was Les McEwen, that said in business you can either be king or you can be rich. And so he's like, he was talking about it in a book, talking about if you want to scale beyond your ability, you have to get out of the way. And so what a leader needs to do is raise up other leaders who have other competencies that complement their weaknesses. And so like when you talk about community, it's you surround yourself with people who are strong in the areas you are weak in. Well, that is predicated on the idea you know what your weaknesses are, and that you communicate your weaknesses to your team, and that your weaknesses influence the decisions around you. Andy Stanley has, in my opinion, the best book on leadership. It's called The Next Generation Leader. And he does a really good job of synthesizing a lot of information down to very compact, very useful, very memorable and portable stuff. And he'll even admit in the book that he's like, I didn't create any of this. This is me giving you the best of all of the things that I've learned in leadership from many other people and experience. And in that process, he says that a leader, you only do what only you can do. And the less you do, the more you accomplish. And the less you do, the more you enable others to accomplish. And so you have to be able to get out of your way, admit your faults, and then focus on your strengths, and you hire to your weaknesses. Because there's this myth of the well-rounded leader that says a leader has to be well-rounded. That's not a thing. Like, people are not people are specialty tools in a complex toolbox that is trying to build something, right? And so you don't have a hammer that is a really good screwdriver. You don't have a screwdriver that is a really good wrench. Like, you can make things do stuff, but we are created to be specialty tools doing something. And so you have to know what your skills are and your strengths are, and you do those things, and you don't do the things that you're not good at. You enable other people to do the things that are around you, because it's the plurality of talent inside the C-suite. And so like in business, and like how this applies to the business world, is you have to be able to easily and effortlessly tell your team what you are terrible at, because it's usually the thing that they're great at, and you have to give them the ability to express their weaknesses and failures as well. Because people will take their tone from the leader, and so if the leader is hiding their weaknesses, it sets the rule. It's never written in any handbook. It's never written in any onboarding paperwork that says don't admit your faults because it'll get you in trouble. But as soon as it is evident that the leader of an organization is not aware of their own weaknesses or just won't admit them, it becomes the rule of the day. Nobody admits their weaknesses. Everybody pretends. Everybody hides.
Even if you write a policy against it.
Oh,
open door, come, provide. Yeah, you're right. It's yeah. The other thing that you're touching on there that's really powerful is that, it really is the responsibility of the leader to set this tone. And so, certainly not having all the answers, but even when you do have the answers, John Maxwell talks about it's better to ask the right questions than to have the right answer. And so if we believe that we're building people, then everything's a learning opportunity. And so even if, it's an easy answer, even if it's an easy answer for you, now you're not going to let your people, run into a meat grinder, but to challenge them to think and come to the conclusion and then lead them there is powerful. But you were asking, in the business world, it really is going to rise and fall on the leader, because most of these leaders grew up in a world where it is not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be real. It's not safe in the normal business world to admit your failures. It's not going to be safe. It's not going to be safe to sit in a meeting and have the dissenting opinion. It takes a really exceptional organization to do that. And so these leaders that are running organizations need to create that culture in those organizations, that there is safety in the learning, there is safety in failure, there is safety in the dissenting opinion. But it takes the leader to do it, because in reality, everyone in that organization has learned from other organizations that it is not safe, and legitimately it could cost you your job. Now, there's some character pieces in there that sometimes it's worth losing your job over to stand up for what's right. But I think that's really powerful. The leader has to set the tone, and it means. And the other thing, there's a myth that I can hide my weaknesses.
Yeah.
Admitting them, there's no fault to, because the people already know you're weak in that. You're not providing any piece of information for them they didn't already have.
It behooves you to say it first, because everybody else already knows it.
Everyone else already knows it. Absolutely. They just realized you came to the party finally.
Yes.
Either you were dishonest or oblivious.
Yeah.
I've been both as well.
And all leaders have. And that's the thing, is we are all human. We're every leader out there. Nobody came out of the womb as a great leader. So they've all gone through that learning process.
So when I think of those like investment bankers that I was sitting at dinner with, and they're like, oh, that's a bunch of woo-woo, I would assume, my assumption is that they've never been given an opportunity or been in an environment that was the culture. That was
what they probably mean is that would not work in my world.
That would not work in my world.
Yes.
That's exactly what they were telling me.
Yeah.
And they're probably right. In most companies, any sign of weakness would
it's enough.
It's enough. Oh well, you're not really going to be able to handle taking the organization where we want to go. So yeah.
So then it's because of this culture, no one, those people are successful, so their sphere, I'm sure, is they have capability.
It depends on how you define success, though.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wonder if it could be.
Well, they may have vision and they may have purpose. So there's two ingredients that are in there working. Once they've gotten to that level, they probably have some control over their own time. So there may be some time ingredient in there. And they may have some community that either all the people in the department hate the boss. So there is community there. They're together. There is community there. Not good necessarily. A gang of thieves can have community and a common purpose. That doesn't mean it's good. So yeah, they may still have some of the ingredients in there, but what they probably don't have is a real healthy dose of openness. And they probably don't have what we would call community.
Yeah.
Because it's an unsafe community, because even their friends probably don't have complete open trust, because this friend could use this piece of information to destroy me.
As soon as you go against the community culture,
done.
You're done. It's based on it's psychological safety is like what you're talking about, is the ability to be actually you where you are. And it's really hard to do that, period. It's even harder to do that in a place which de-incentivizes psychological safety. Like you're talking about on sabbatical, you had an opportunity where everything else was taken away. You had the chance to be psychologically safe with yourself and the other people around you. It's hard. It's not easy. It's super tricky. But then add on to that, like, I don't know how to be open with myself. So then you layer on top of that, I'm in an environment which de-incentivizes openness around me. And it's going to be a really hard room to get out of.
One of the things we talked about around this podcast is, really trying to leave people with, well, what can I do then? Okay, I hear this talk and I hear this, it's important, but this is the world I live in, and it's still not safe for me. But I think what I would challenge leaders to do is, it takes courage to be a leader. And there's a sacrifice to being a leader, that there are no perks to leadership. It takes sacrifice. And so even if you're not the top of the chain in whatever organization you're in, you're the head of a department, or you're a manager over 3 people, that you take the responsibility. You said it in the first podcast. These people are entrusted to you. And so in that department, celebrate when people get it right. Celebrate when people are open. Celebrate, and you stand in the line of fire if necessary to protect that person who not carelessly made a mistake. There's accountability for recklessness, but they genuinely, their heart was in the right place. They were genuinely attempting to do the work, and it just didn't work. And so you hear books and you see speakers talk about celebrate failure, celebrate the process, don't focus on the end results only. But I think it means that even a middle-level manager can control what's beneath them. They may still be living in an unsafe world, but their department will perform better. Over the long term, their department will perform better because their people will be better than the other departments.
And even if you don't have the position of authority in an organization, every person has some amount of influence. And so it could be lateral influence, or it could be you're an employee and you have a small cohort of people who you have equity with, like relational equity with. You are a leader. So like leadership and positions of authority are not always lined up on top of each other. Sometimes people have positions of authority, but they do not have influence over people, and they have to lean on rule and authoritarianism and discipline in order to get people to behave a certain way. And then you have one employee in an organization who has all the influence, and that person can turn an entire organization in a certain direction. It doesn't matter what level you are in an organization, you have some level of influence. And the first level is with yourself. Self-leadership is the first step to any aspect of leadership. And so figuring out how to be open and honest with yourself. Like, you can't tell other people what your weaknesses are or admit your failures if you cannot admit it to yourself, and if you can't admit to yourself what you are actually great at and what you're actually not great at.
So I lose about 15 pairs of earrings a year. If I was a good leader, does that mean I would stop losing earrings?
No.
I know, I'm serious. This is a serious question, because I'm just like, when I hear that, I'm like, I'm never going to be a good leader.
So strengths and weaknesses are only strengths and weaknesses in context.
In context, in the right place.
In the certain context. So there are some instances, like I am incredibly absent-minded as well, and I'm very disorganized. But I'm very present in meetings. I'm very present, but like the same thing which makes me absent-minded in organization also makes me incredibly present in a specific moment with people, which makes them feel very seen and very heard and very understood. And I can usually think very quickly on my feet, which means I don't have to rely on the weakness of having to be tremendously prepared for something ahead of time because I'm very quick. So like the strength and the weakness is just literally a matter of context.
That's exactly what it is. You put the right strength in the wrong spot, and it actually becomes a weakness.
Yeah.
You have a person who's very open and very forgiving, and then you put them in a loss prevention role, and the person just embezzled $1 million, and but they were out on hard times, and I understand, and now the person still has a job, and so you put a person who's suspicious and critical. Well, those are negatives. Nobody wants to be suspicious and critical, but you put them in that exact same role, and now you've got a person who's going to protect the assets of the organization, and ultimately the viability of an organization, the reputation of an organization. And so, the whole strengths and weaknesses thing it's all about context.
There was a study they did with chimpanzees in the wild, and
did they lose earrings?
Worse.
Are you saying Chimpanzee?
That's what I was like. I was like, Stephen.
They did this. So it was an experiment they did with chimpanzees in the wild, and I think it was chimpanzees. It could have been a different type of primate, but they observed these groups, these like family structures, and they observed them long enough to note which of the animals were exhibiting anxious tendencies. They were just like nervous and skittish, and they just took them out. Like they took them out of the group, and then they came back a year later. The entire tribe was dead. Because that specific tendency of being anxious, those were the people that saw the predators first. Those are the people that were alerting the entire. And yeah, they did appear anxious. They appeared like skittish and nervous, and not team players, not optimistic, not abundance mindset, not like working with other people and like being able to see the future. But if you remove those people from organization, if they don't feel safe or if they feel like they have to leave, it's going to steer off of the edge. Like you need everybody's particular bent and view and perspective to be able to steer well. But it only works if there's openness and cross communication across skill sets and across power hierarchies. Because as soon as there isn't, whoever is in charge of steering, you better hope that C-suite has a diverse enough set of people to steer the right direction.
And if you're only just a general manager or a midline manager and you've got 2 or 3 people underneath you, the openness to acknowledge what your weaknesses are. If you have hiring ability, if you've got the authority to hire, then make the right hires in your team and create that diversity there, and your team's going to outperform. Because whether you feel safe admitting your weaknesses to your supervisors or to the company, you can admit them to yourself, and you can do something about it in yourself. You can take control back to yourself of, I can affect what I'm doing here, and I can train these talents into these people, or I can hire these skills into the department. And it protects your weaknesses so they never even get advertised to the rest of the company, because you built around it, which is what your CEO should be doing as well at the company level. But no matter what level manager or leader you are, control downstream from you and make this thing in your environment. And at least those people that you've been entrusted with, you're going to be able to provide that kind of career and that kind of work experience that achieves their potential, that it puts these ingredients into their life, regardless of whether the company as a whole is putting it into your life. You can still affect downstream from you.
Yeah.
I don't know where I started believing that a leader has to have all the answers. A leader can't lose earrings. A leader has to be organized. I mean,
the name of your book is going to be Leaders Lose Earrings.
That might be it. And because you never really read a leadership book that is like, it's really okay if you're disorganized. You don't hear it. It's like, you need to have a clear vision. You need to have clear steps, and you have to know how you're going to get there, and you have to be able to lead everyone in these clear steps. And I'm like, I jump in and figure it out. And like, to tell me that I have to have clear vision with steps, I'm like, I won't.
I think that was the brilliance of what the work that Marcus Buckingham did in Strength Finders and all, to bring that to light of, we're all built a certain way, and work in your strengths and work around your weaknesses. And so I think that brought it, to the conversation, at least, that everyone has weaknesses. Every leader out there has weaknesses, and the smart ones figure out a way to work around them. But then it also just became societal. Work on your weaknesses, get better, be well-rounded, and all of these myths that just became facts because they got repeated enough, and they're not true. And I think intrinsically we know they're not true, but
intrinsically I know they're not true, but then I couldn't get it to translate up to my brain or whatever.
It seems like eventually what you hear enough of, it just gets into your head and it becomes part of it.
Andy Stanley talks about it, like, he's like, look, if you're a 3 at organization, but you're a 7 out of 10 at like people, like sales or something, like, people oriented skills. He's like, if you work really, really, really hard and you get that 3 up to a 5, you're still really bad. But if you go from a 7 to a 9, you are in the top 5% in the country, in the world, in those specific skill sets. So it's like, why on earth do we think that we need to spend all this time and energy and effort to go from being really bad to still being pretty bad or mediocre at something, when you could just find someone and work with them, hire them, outsource your weaknesses, and then collaborate with them so that they're working in their strength and you're working in your strength. And that's where 2 + 2 = 5, like that that's the scalability. That's where all the scalability comes in.
And at the end of the day, you feel energized. So, Marcus talks about that a strength is something that makes you feel strong, that strengthens you.
You like it.
And so you're physically tired maybe because you put in a lot of effort that day, but at the end of the day, your heart is full and you're alive, and and weaknesses drain you. You could even be good at them, but doing them all day absolutely drains you. You're good at administration when you hate it. So at the end of the day, all your creativity is gone. All of your desire to try this again is gone because it just drained you. That's an actual weakness. So being able to work around it, you can't get rid of everything. So sometimes you gotta use grit and you gotta dig into that. But to the degree you can control it to get those things, and then there's the strengths and weaknesses that just don't matter. Who cares if you lose your earrings? It just doesn't matter. And so we try to think, well, that means I'm disorganized. No,
and it's okay to be disorganized.
It's okay to be disorganized.
Well, it's funny because you could look at our teams and you can choose our salespeople just by who has their fob on their key to get in the door. Because statistically, the sales team and the people team will lose it way more than I doubt Nikki will ever lose her tab. You will never lose your tab.
Yeah, but that's also what makes the salespeople good.
Yeah,
because they can fly by the
yes.
seat of their pants. And when you're face to face with a customer and the customer has needs and desires, then you better be able to. Because if you're stuck into I have to go through this process and I need to go check this thing, then you're not present. You can't get things done. So it makes them terrible at keeping up with their security badge, but great at actually being present and engaging and finding a solution quickly in the moment, face to face with.
That's what I'm going to write in my leadership book.
It's okay to lose earrings.
I'm not going to say anything about being organized.
No,
I'm not.
No, because there's organized
people. Hire organized people.
Exactly
End
right.
of chapter.
Yeah.
Organized people know how to be organized. Hire them. End of chapter 6.
And they love it.
Yeah.
And because they're living in their strengths. At the end of the day, they did what you hate, but they are fired up and having the time in their life. You see it with Angela creating a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And I'm like,
She loves it.
I know. It's so foreign.
So
I'm like,
weird.
Really?
Watching Kyra make spreadsheets, I'm like, God bless you.
I know. Or Jason, who creates a 15-page spreadsheet with formulas that connects each of them. And I'm like, never. I would never do that.
And all the spreadsheet masters are going, oh, what a beginner.
So the rethreaded process, taking your threads of harm, maybe even good, taking your threads in your life and rethreading them into something that helps you reach your potential. So maybe we should expand the definition to
I think your analogy of threads to a rope is really powerful. I don't know how easy that is. I don't know if that's terminology that you use a lot, but I know it's come up in a couple of your talks, and I think that matters, whether they're threads of harm or threads of success and growth and health and all. Its potential is taking the tools and the things, my talents and my skills, and weaving them into a strong rope. I think it's. And
then you take the rope and make a big sphere.
Unthreaded good is still unthreaded.
It's still unthreaded.
Yeah.
It still can't achieve its potential because it's weak.
Yeah,
it's weak. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've never used unthreaded in the whole analogy.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
It's a good thought to maybe close it out on. All right, thank you guys, and thank you for being different than me and alike enough to me. Sometimes we're.
Well, and I think this is a great place to say, and I know the Rethreaded team would yell from the mountaintops that this is true. You get into your head and you think, okay, I'm not a great leader because of these things, and I think we talk a little bit about that's this. We look at these leaders' highlight reel and compare it to our behind the scenes. And so, the very fact that you have held Rethreaded with open hands and allowed people to come around you, I think, as hopefully we've clarified in this conversation, that is a good leader.
Yeah.
And so all of these misconceptions about power and about having all the right answers and being this brilliant thing, to be able to hold your organization with open hands bring people around you and build human beings, and you've accomplished that. So I think hopefully in this conversation, the leaders that are out there that have poser syndrome or whatever, imposter syndrome, maybe they can look at it and go, oh, let me look at the people around me.
Imposter syndrome only shows up when you are getting close to your potential. Like that's really only when it shows up. It shows up when you are past your comfort zone and you are a little bit beyond, and you think this isn't who I am, because you're a little bit right, but it is who you are created to be. And it's who you are trying to be, and it's who you are close to becoming.
That's
so imposter syndrome is a really great sign.
That's great.
That you are growing in the right direction.
That's great.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Right. If you lose earrings, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Leaders lose earrings too.
Leaders lose earrings too.
Yeah.
It's okay if you don't wear earrings.
It is okay. Yeah. I've lost 0 earrings in my life. So
I've lost earrings in my life.
All right. Thank you for listening. We hope you got to take away something valuable that you can put in your life that helps you reach your potential today.